right. Well, my name is Michael Alden, and we are here in Blue Vase Studios. We are also live on Facebook. For those of you that are on Facebook, you're kind of getting the left side of my face, and I'll try and look at you a little bit here and there because I think you get a better view of my entire face. I look a lot better that way. My next guest is a really, really funny guy. He wrote a book, and when you first look at it, you think that it's truly a book about sales. And there's a million books out there about sales. I've read a bunch of them. There's a million books about business, of course, and I've written 3 of those million books. But this book is written by Ken Kupchik. Is that how you pronounce it, Ken? Ken Kupchik, right? I hope. Yes? Yeah?
You got it.
All right, cool. And the title of the book is called The Sales Survival Handbook, Cold Calls, Commissions, and Caffeine Addiction, The Real Truth About Life and Sales. Now, here's the thing. As we talk about caffeine addiction, I have my second coffee here, double shot in both of them as well, and I've been in sales my whole life. Ken and I actually met through a mutual friend who we both sold cars together. So this is actually, it's a funny book, but it also does prepare you for sales. And whether you're in sales now or whether you're looking to get into sales, the humor to it is also it's not only humorous, but it also does give you kind of truly a guide on what it's like being in sales. Ken, thanks for being my guest.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Well, so I was joking with you right in the very beginning. Sales let's just get right into it. I mean, people always say that sales is one of the most brutal professions there is. They say that insurance sales and car sales are probably the top 2 most difficult ones. Why is sales so difficult for so many people?
I think the reason it's difficult is because your job in sales is to basically deal with rejection and to push through that rejection in order to defy the odds and close a deal. And I think a lot of people mistakenly assume when they go into it that it's just all about, making a lot of money and showing up at the office drunk. And it is that. But most of the job is dealing with rejection, and people can't handle it.
Okay, so you said making a lot of money, and then you kind of snuck in being drunk. What do you mean by that?
Showing up at the office drunk? Yeah. No, I mean, it's I joke, but sales is filled with kind of aggressive personalities, interesting personalities, I'd say more so than other professions. And, you got to have really thick skin to survive on a sales floor, as anybody who's in sales knows. And, you have a lot of fun, you meet a lot of people, you get beat up by customers, by sales managers, by coworkers. And, if you can hack it, you get a really nice paycheck too.
Tell us a little bit about your journey into, getting into the sales world. How'd you end up in sales? I think you might call yourself maybe a recovering salesperson now, but how did you get into sales?
Yeah, so, I, growing up, I was really into cars and, always wanted to make money so I could buy nice cars, nice things. I'm originally from Russia, so, we're immigrants. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and I was in college, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And a girlfriend of mine at the time had a friend who was dating this guy, and he was making all this money. And we went out one night, and he said, "Hey, why don't you go into the mortgage business? Because you can make a lot of money there. All you have to do is read a book, take a test, and you can make 6 figures." And it sounded good to me, so I graduated college, I think it was June 13th, and on June 16th, which was the following Monday, I started my first sales job.
Wow, that was quick. It's funny. I'm going to just digress a little bit. You talk about being an immigrant. I just actually had Brian Buffini on the podcast, and he wrote the book called The Emigrant Edge. And he's from Ireland, and he talks about how immigrants, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about this. I know it's not necessarily related to your book, but how immigrants seem, true first generation, even second generation, seem to really have a true appreciation for what people call the American dream. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, is that a reality?
100%. I mean, it's I, as far as my family goes, I was lucky enough to have a very hardworking father, and we came to this country with nothing, And he, we lived in this tiny apartment, family of four. When we moved here in 1989, he got set up with a job through a friend as an entry level, basically just above an assembler at a power supply company in Andover, Massachusetts. And, now 28 years later, he's actually still with the same company, but he's a head design engineer. So, he's moved up in this company, over the years, just working really hard. And, the lifestyle of, my family has changed accordingly. So we went from the tiny apartment, then we got a condo, then my parents were able to buy a home. And, I've seen that firsthand. And as far as, me as a first generation, I've always looked for other opportunities. Always knew there was a lot out there that you could do besides just, punching a clock 9 to 5. So, even when I did work for other people, I was always had my eye out for what else I could do. Was never complacent. Still am not, like you're not. And, while I think most other people in a job are like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. And it's funny, all of the guys that I worked with in sales, in the mortgage industry, they are still, for the most part, doing the same thing. Very few of them have really pushed themselves to move up or to try to change their situation, which is fine. But, I think the immigrant aspect of it, pushes you. And I think there's one other thing that's important, and I don't know if Brian, your guest, pointed it out, but the fact that somebody leaves a country to go to another country, that in itself involves so much risk that the people who do that to begin with, who are, have the guts to leave the country and take that risk, leave everything behind, they tend to be risk takers by nature. People willing to take risks. So therefore, logically, they'd be better at entrepreneurship, or at least more willing to do that.
Yeah, actually, he did mention that, and that's interesting that you say that. I think about his story was he came over, I think, with $80 and with nothing, right? Like a lot of you hear that same story over and over and over again from people that lived in other countries that weren't given the same opportunities that are here in the United States. Even in Russia, or you come from a country where it's a third world country where you don't have you literally, some of these people don't have running water, electricity, everything, and they come to the United States and they are very, very successful. It's because of they saw what it's like not to have, right? And so they're really appreciative of it. And his book, again, is called, I'm not trying to promote his book, but what you said is exactly right. And I found it very, very interesting. I think about me. So I grew up poor, right? So I'm like, I didn't grow up in another country, but I'm like, I never want to be poor again. So I know a lot of other people
right.
that grew up with nothing, and they're just constantly just grinding out because there's almost maybe a little bit of fear, like, hey, I don't want to be in that position ever again. So the immigrant edge is it's an advantage in a way because you've seen what it's like in other places, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your book. Okay, so again, it's called The Sales Survival Handbook, Cold Calls, Commissions, and Caffeine Addiction, The Real Truth About Life and Sales. Now, I started out, I'm going to show it up right here on Facebook. I actually started out my career, so to speak, fresh out of college, like you, selling cars. And I never considered myself a salesperson. I said to myself, man, I do not want to sell cars. I mean, I'll be candid. I was like, that's not me. I looked down upon that profession, and I've told it a million times. It was probably the best thing I did. But your book, unlike mine, you talk about the crazy things that happen in a sales environment. Are all sales environments crazy?
I would say not all, but the overwhelming majority. It's funny. It reminds me of something that happened in my career, which, it isn't in the book or anything, but, I had gone from a very aggressive sales floor. I had left the position and I was interviewing, and I interviewed at this company, and it was a recruiting firm, so it was, a sales environment too. Anyways, I do the interview, then they walk me through down to the sales floor to show me around, and you could hear a pin drop at the sales floor. It was just everybody in this open concept room, so people weren't in like cubicles or anything. There was just a bunch of people sitting around. You would think they were like, data entry people or something, but it was a floor for salespeople. Needless to say, I didn't take that position because, you need the energy, you need the ball busting, and that's what makes it fun. So to answer your question, I'd say the overwhelming majority of sales floors are crazy, and I don't know if a non-crazy sales floor would be successful. What do you think?
Well, again, that was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you. So, in your book, you actually give a test, which I haven't read your whole book, but I found that hysterical. Tell us a little bit about your test that you give people, and I'm just laughing just thinking about it because it's so on point about the psychology that it takes to really be a salesperson. And before you get into that, but one of the things that I always tell people is I say no matter what you're doing in life. We are all salespeople. Whether or not you choose that as a quote profession is another thing. But you give someone, the readers again a test, and based off of their responses, you also tell them how well they'll do in the field of quote sales. Tell us about that test and why it's important.
Sure. Yeah. So the test kind of starts off asking, are you motivated by money? Do you have a strong work ethic? Can you handle being ignored? And then it gets into the real nitty gritty, which is, can you handle somebody yelling at you on a regular basis? Are you okay with working nights and weekends until you feel like you're going to die? Are you able to handle people repeatedly lying to your face as if you're some sort of gullible moron? When upset, are you able to cry on the inside like a winner? Is free time overrated? And do you thrive in a fast-paced environment where you have to hide in the janitor's closet in order to find one single moment of sweet solitude? And I think the test is pretty accurate if you're going to survive in sales. Michael, I'm sure you've seen this, over your career as far as salespeople, is if somebody hasn't worked in sales before and they get a job in sales, and to some people it's like walking into a buzzsaw, and you'll see, I would say 40% maybe of new salespeople don't last beyond a few months. There are all these people that are like, okay, I'm going to try sales. They see what it's like. They're excited maybe day one. Then by, the end of week 2 or week 3, they're gone because it was so awful. I mean, I worked with guys that would show up, this happened more than once, that would show up at an inbound call center that I worked at years ago, and they would go to lunch. Okay, they would stay the morning. They would go to lunch, and then they would never come back, and we'd never hear from them again. Yeah. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that too. When you think about it, I'm going to tell you a quick story. Actually, the guy who introduced me, his name is Andrew. He remembers this story. When I first got into sales, again, I didn't think it was going to be a sales guy. It was car sales in the late '90s. The economy was booming. I knew I was going to go to law school. At least that's what I wanted to do. I saw myself as a lawyer. So again, I kind of just really didn't have a high expectations really or high respect for that profession. I go in there. It's July. And like you said, for the first week, no one talked to me, right? None of the salespeople even looked at me. And if they did look at me, it was like a look of death, right? They just hated me because they saw what? They saw that I was going to be, essentially taking, food out of their mouths and money out of their pockets. That's how they looked at me, right? So I sit down in the showroom in Peabody, Massachusetts. Again, Andrew, who's probably watching right now, will remember this. And I'm a big dude, right? Not that big though. I lean back in this chair in the showroom, in the middle of the showroom on a Saturday. It's packed, full of salespeople, full of customers, and the chair shatters, like completely shatters, and I fall. I lay on. I almost cracked my head open. I could have been seriously injured. And this is what happened.
Oh,
My
man.
sales manager comes up to me and hands me a thing of Elmer's glue and said, "Go outside and fucking fix the chair." Right? I mean, and that.
Oh, that's so typical.
Right? I mean, that's what it's. I mean, I was like, "You kid?" And by the way, I went outside and I tried to fix the chair. And I'm out, and so I'm sitting there. I'm gluing this chair together, and then finally I said, "You know what? Fuck this. I'm going back inside. I am not here to glue chairs." And I bring the chair back in, and the manager said, "Man, I was wondering what was going to take you so long." So it was almost like they were just kind of testing me. At that
Oh, yeah.
that same job, I had a customer physically assault me. And by the way,
Right.
I told my boss, I said, "Listen, I'm going to Europe for a month." He says, "You're not going to have a job when you come back." I came back and I still had a job, and the only reason why I had the job is because I was good. Sales is like, when I think of like the insanity of it, because I've been in it before. It is totally nuts.
It is. It is. It absolutely is. It's and the thing is, there's so many sales floors everywhere. Every company has a sales force. Some are crazier than others, but it's like this entire, to some degree, forgotten, the people. There's 14 million salespeople in the U.S. that people don't think about. People kind of forget about. They're like, "Oh, well, you're just a salesperson," but it's one of the biggest segments of the workforce.
Yeah, they say it's the highest paid profession, right? If you want to make a lot of money, you get in sales. In a minute, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you a little bit about why you wrote the book. But folks, if you're listening right now, if you're watching right now, I'm on with Ken Kupchik. He is the author of the Sales Survival Handbook, Cold Calls, Commissions, and Caffeine Addiction: The Real Truth About Life and Sales. The book is available everywhere. It's a hysterical book. I haven't read the whole thing. I can't wait to read the whole thing. But it's available on Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble. If you're listening to this right now, go ahead and pre-order it today. It's a great book. The parts of the book that I read were funny, but it's actually real life stuff in there as well. I love the humor part of it, but it really it gives you really kind of inside track on what goes on in the world of sales, but also making you laugh a little bit and helping you out as far as what it really takes to be a salesperson. So, why'd you decide to write the book?
Yeah, so. They say you should write, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you should write the book that you want to read. I think most sales books are kind of the same. They follow the same formula. I think they're, you've read one, you've read them all. No disrespect to people who write about sales, but I think it's true. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to be a follower. I never have been. And, I decided to do something different.
Yeah, and so, but you're not a comedian by trade, right? You were a sales guy.
Well, I have a kind of an interesting background, so I have done stand-up comedy in the past.
Oh, you have?
I have, yeah. It's not something I pursued aggressively, but I've launched and sold a satire site a few years ago. So my background is in sales, but it's also in content creation. Writing and, writing humor. So I thought it was I thought it was an excellent person to write a book like this.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot to mention some of your sites. Your Facebook page is @SalesHumor. Your Instagram page is sales_humor, and also you have a great LinkedIn page. It's Salesperson Humor. So again, folks, if you'd like some more information about Ken and the book, you can also find him there. It's actually really funny stuff. Again, totally related to sales. I want to talk a little bit about, and this one I love that. You talked a little bit about this. Let's talk about sales quotas and the insanity of a sales quota, and tell us a little bit about some of the crazy things that happens in sales for salespeople as far as their quotas.
Yeah, so I think the most interesting thing about sales quotas is kind of the magic that happens towards the end of the month or the end of a quarter. I'm sure you remember this from car sales, but it's amazing. It seems like so say you have a month to reach your quota. It seems like, the last 3 days, the entire company will exert, superhuman effort in order to hit goals, which, obviously the advice, a professional would give is, okay, well, you should exert that same effort every day of every month so that you can say, so you don't have to go the extra mile to hit your quota at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. But, realistically, it's just, insanity happens. You'll do anything you can to hit quota. And sales is kind of the great equalizer because, in marketing, and maybe less so these days because there's a lot of trackable, everything's trackable in marketing, but, you really can't lie. You can't fake your way to the numbers, because at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, your numbers are going to be what they are. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much you smile, how great you are, how likable you are. In sales, if you're not hitting your numbers, then you are nobody, right?
Right. Yeah, but the other part too, which is like, and I was talking again to our mutual friend Andrew, and this, you and I talked about this, prior to the interview on the phone, that I just find, which is just insane, is, again, you have sales managers who, they're trying to motivate you, and let's say you actually hit your quota, right? And then all of a sudden, you hit your quota, which was high in and of itself anyway, and then they just double it, for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
And and you talk a little bit about this too, like that invites, criminality too. It invites, a lot of, by the way, a lot of the salespeople that I sold cars with, and this is true. This is just a lot. People, a friend of mine said to me, most salespeople are like, one step away from like, breaking the law. It's like, so like, if your quote is $1 million, right, in sales revenue, and then they double it to $2 million, you're like, well.
Right.
What am I going to do here? How am I going to do this? Right? You talk a little bit about like, about breaking the law and stuff. A little bit. I mean, it's nuts, right?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's like anything else, right? It's gaming the system, right? So, salespeople are going to figure out ways to game the system for their advantage, whether that's through sandbagging, which for anybody listening who doesn't know, sandbagging is when you intentionally delay the closing of a deal, so that it benefits you next month or next quarter, next pay cycle, because say you already hit your goal, you want to get an early start or some other form of bonus by delaying it. But yeah, people are going to game the system. I used to work, my first sales job, which was, again, in the mortgage business. We had people that would literally take deals that were in their name. So that, two guys are working deals. One guy would sign all of his deals over to the other guy so that they would hit a higher tier of bonus. And then the other guy would pay out the first guy for all of his deals at the higher rate in cash. So they would both, and this happened all the time. I mean, it wasn't, an anomaly or anything. And, this happens everywhere. So it's a constant battle between, management trying to rein in their sales reps, get them to produce while, not paying them too much, because God forbid, right? And the salespeople trying to game the system. And it's like, it's like being in a maximum security prison where, the inmates are always trying to find a way to get one over the guards. It's kind of similar to that.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about, gaming the system. It's someone who's been in sales my whole life and had, hundreds of salespeople work for me. One of the things we talk about on management level is how can we make it so they can't game the system? Because you're right, no matter what you give them, and in a way, you kind of have to appreciate their ingenuity, is that salespeople, they're always trying to find a way, ultimately, to make more money for themselves. Right, and they will kind of do whatever it is, if there's something within our database somewhere that we didn't see, they're going to find it and they're going to use it to their advantage, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a constant battle. What do you usually do to make sure that everyone's happy?
Well, it's interesting too because as a salesperson myself, as someone who has earned commissions, who has had a livelihood on commissions. It's funny you talk about in the book. Hey, if you want to be in sales, if you can get comfortable, with inconsistent pay, then this might be a profession for you. But one of the things that I've learned throughout the years, because it's happened to me, is and you talk about compensation plans and how to understand them in your book. But one is you don't want to fuck with the compensation plan from the top level down. You just don't, because you're going to disenfranchise your salespeople and you're going to piss them off. But there are times where you have to change the comp plan for one reason or another. And I'll give you an example of what has happened to me over the years. We sell dietary supplements, and we had it so that in our inbound call center, they could sell essentially as many as they wanted, right? And so I had some heavy hitting salespeople that would just sell a customer an inbound call, 100 bottles of one of our particular products, and they thought that was a good thing. It was a high ticket. They got a high commission, decent amount of revenue. But it wasn't good for the company, right? And so you'd have a conversation with them and say, look, man, I know that's there, but I can't have you doing that anymore. Just please stop. And then an hour later after the conversation, they did it again. And I'm like, did you not just listen to the? Were we both in the same room? Because I used to get to a point, even today, sometimes I get to a point. I'm like, did the words actually come out of my mouth, or was it just in my brain? Because sometimes I'm thinking, I'm like, maybe I'm just not a very good communicator, and that still may be the case. But but I'm pretty sure that I would bring other people in the room, like, I'm going to have this conversation and see what happens. And so one of the things again I learned is you never want to mess with the compensation plan if you can't. The other thing that I find is nuts, absolutely nuts, is your top level guys. It happens. I've seen it happen. I'm sure you've seen it happen a million times. You get the top guys, the really good salespeople, the guys that are inherently great salespeople, that are just they're just really good at what they're doing. You can't teach their skills, and they're the 6-figure earners. Those are the guys that you really don't want to mess with. And so when you change the comp plan, you're going to lose those guys, So when we modify our comp plan, which we have before, I've modified my comp plan a few different times, and the only reason why I did it was because it was better for the company. And then if they actually did it, now here's the second part, because it's always good for the company, but it was better for the long-term benefits of the company, and it was better for them if they just followed the system. You and I talked about the system before. If they had just followed it, and as a salesperson, right? So if we've reversed the roles, that's a hard thing to swallow, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean it's. I remember having that happen to me before, and you just feel like, man, these guys are just really just trying to take every dollar they can out of my pocket. But a lot of times when I say again it's better for the company, it's not necessarily more profitable. It's just better for the long term of that particular campaign.
Absolutely, yeah. It's I think you're an incredible salesperson, so. I think you yourself are probably pretty good at putting yourself in your employee's shoes and knowing what it's going to take. So I think if they just listen to you, they'll be successful as long as you don't keep changing the comp plan.
Hey, listen. So all right, we don't have a lot of time left. So let me ask you this: so if someone picks up the Sales Survival, again, we're on with Ken Kupchik. He is the author of the Sales Survival Handbook, Cold Calls, Commissions, and Caffeine Addiction, The Real Truth About Life and Sales. The book's available everywhere. It's doing really well on Amazon. It's one of the top books on Amazon, number one new release. It's doing well on Barnes & Noble. It's available everywhere. It's a really, really funny book. Ken, if someone picks up this book, what are they going to get out of it?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they laugh. I think if you don't laugh at least 20 times out loud while reading this book, then you're probably dead inside, or don't have a good sense of humor. So I hope the first thing that they get is enjoyment and entertainment. But I think it's a very comprehensive. Besides being funny, it's a comprehensive guide to sales. When I wrote it, I said, okay, what what can I cover here while covering sales in its entirety? And I went through it multiple times, and I don't think there's anything that I missed. But pretty much, whether you're new to sales, whether you've been in it for a while, whether you're an ex-salesperson, whether you're considering going into sales, I think it's the best comprehensive sales manual there is, but it's also really funny.
Yeah, again, I've only read maybe about 20 pages of it, and I tell you, I laughed way more than 20 times. So yeah, if you're not laughing,
Awesome.
if you're not laughing with this book, like you said, yeah, I think you probably are dead inside. So again, we've been on with Ken Kupchik. He is the author of the Sales Survival Handbook. Cold calls, commissions, and caffeine addiction, the real truth about life and sales. If you want some more information about Ken, you can find, and also the book, you can also find, he's everywhere, but if you want to check out his Facebook page, a lot of funny stuff there. It's at Sales Humor. If you want to find him on Instagram, it's sales_humor. And then if you want to find him on LinkedIn, it's also, which is a perfect place for this type of book, it's Salesperson Humor on LinkedIn. And then again, the book's available everywhere. Books A Million, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I'm guessing it's probably at all the independent stores too. He's got a big publisher, and it's a congratulations to you, man, because you and I talked about this. It's no easy feat writing a book, but then it's also no easy feat writing a good book, and then after that, doing what you're doing right now, the marketing side of it is also a difficult thing. But I think the book in and of itself is going to do a lot of the marketing for you because it's just a great book. So here it is right here. So I just want to show the cover. I have it right here on my iPad. Take a look at it, Google it, find it. Pre-order the book today if you're listening today, which is September 1st, I believe. I think, is it today? September 1st. Hey, when's it actually release?
So the release date is the 7th. It looks like Amazon's already shipping them to people, but the release date is a week from yesterday. So it's out the 7th. Should be everywhere. The version is available the 12th. Unfortunately, they didn't, or fortunately, I didn't record the Audible version myself. They use somebody else's voice, which might be better. But that's out the 12th. So hope everyone checks it out.
Did you say you broke up for a second? Digital as well? Is it available digitally?
Yes. So it's available on Kindle. It's available MP3 file, and it's available. Will be available on Audible and other audio services.
Can we get it on iBooks and Kobo and like Google Books too? Do you know?
You can definitely get it on Google Books. I believe you will be able to get it on iBooks. I don't know the answer if it's available yet or not, but I will definitely look into that.
Yeah, cool. Again, check it out. It's a funny book. I really, really like it. Ken, I want to thank you for coming on. Also, your website, right? Your website is salessurvivalbook.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Salessurvivalbook.com.
Folks, check it out again. If you want to laugh, if you're in sales, if you just if you want to learn a little bit about sales as well, it's really, really a great book. I get excited about doing these podcasts because I get to meet people like Ken, and in the very beginning we talked a little bit about his background and the things that he's done. I wanted to spend even more time with him talking about maybe we'll bring him back about what it really takes to write a book as well. I mean, he's actually made some pretty big sacrifices to write the book. Maybe again we'll bring him back with that, but it's really, really again an honor to have you, Ken, and again maybe we'll have you back at a later date. My name is Michael Alden, and we'll see you soon.
The blueprint.